I'm calling the police on you right now. That's what HOA Karen screamed at my wife the very day she moved in. Already dialing 911 as she shouted. Suspicious military vehicle. Possible stolen valor, she reported with a smug sense of satisfaction. Within an hour, 2 officers were standing at our door because this self-appointed neighborhood tyrant believed she could humiliate the newcomers. What she didn't know was who she had just falsely accused. I watched her expression shift from confident triumph to pure terror as my wife calmly reached into her wallet. What Morgan pulled out changed everything, permanently. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. After 2 years of a long-distance marriage, my wife, Morgan, was finally coming home. The house was spotless. The neighborhood was peaceful. I was sure this would be the happiest day of my life. I was wrong. There was one thing I hadn't accounted for: the woman 3 houses down. Her name was Victoria Palmer, and she was about to turn our dream into a full-blown nightmare. Even now, I still get chills when I remember the sound of Morgan's military truck engine rumbling down Pinewood Drive. I stood at the window, checking my watch every 30 seconds, like some lovesick teenager. The house was perfect. I'd spent 3 exhausting days scrubbing and polishing every inch. Fresh flowers sat on the dining table, and a welcome home banner stretched across our porch. After 24 months of video calls and hurried weekend visits, we were finally going to be under the same roof. I couldn't stop grinning as I saw that big olive green vehicle turn onto our street and park in our driveway. Morgan stepped out like she owned the place. At 34, she moved with the confidence earned from 8 years of military service. Tall, athletic, and deliberate, every move was precise. When she hugged me, I felt like I could take on the entire world. But I noticed her eyes were still scanning the area, even while she smiled. Old habits from deployment, she would always say. Her laugh was warm as she pointed to the banner, but I knew that alertness in her posture. Morgan was always watching, always analyzing. It's what made her a brilliant officer, and it would soon become our greatest advantage. That's when the storm hit, in the form of a middle-aged woman wearing a pink bathrobe. The slam of Victoria Palmer's front door echoed through the peaceful street like a gunshot. She stormed out, charging toward us with the determination of a general heading into battle. Her phone was already in her hand, eyes laser-focused on our military truck like a predator sizing up its prey. I'd seen Victoria before, clipboard in hand, always impeccably dressed, always finding something to complain about. But I'd never seen her like this, so intense, so calculated. She was speedwalking toward us, snapping photos from every angle like a self-declared investigative journalist. Her fingers flew over her phone as she instantly posted to the neighborhood group chat: military invasion threatening our peaceful community. Without a shred of subtlety, she made her grand entrance. Excuse me. Her voice sliced through the quiet afternoon like a rusty blade. I'm Victoria Palmer, HOA compliance officer for this community. That vehicle is in violation of Section 3B of our guidelines. No commercial vehicles allowed to park on residential streets for over 30 minutes. There were no introductions, no small talk, just pure attack mode. I tried to explain, speaking calmly and politely. Ma'am, this is my wife Morgan. She's simply moving her things from base housing. But Victoria cut me off as sharply as a buzzsaw. I don't care who she says she is. Rules are rules. And by the way, I've checked the military database. There's no record of active duty personnel at this address. Watching Morgan's reaction was fascinating. While I was flustered and defensive, she stayed perfectly calm, almost entertained by Victoria's performance. She didn't respond, immediately, just watched Victoria carefully, like a scientist studying a rare specimen. Her silence rattled Victoria more than any argument could. This neighborhood has standards. Victoria's voice cracked as she attracted more curious neighbors to their windows. She thrived on the growing crowd. I've preserved property values here for 12 years. I won't allow some fake army wife and her spineless husband to ruin that. When she called Morgan a fake army wife, my blood boiled. But Morgan, she just tilted her head slightly, as if Victoria had said something vaguely amusing. Victoria kept going, proudly listing her HOA victories. I've forced 6 other problem families out of this neighborhood. The Johnsons left after 3 months. The Garcias couldn't handle my enforcement. I've processed 23 violations this year alone. I am the law here. It wasn't about rules, it was about power. Victoria had built her entire identity around controlling Pinewood. Dr. Victoria called the HOA hotline right there on our driveway. Emergency violation, military vehicle, possible fraud. I'll document everything. Neighbors began to gather. Mrs. Henderson from 2 houses down looked worried. The old man across the street shook his head, but I couldn't tell who he was disappointed in. Victoria thrived on their attention, growing louder and bolder. Morgan finally broke her silence, her voice steady as iron. Ma'am, you seem very thorough. Tell me, do you know what real authority actually looks like? It wasn't a question, it was a challenge. Victoria scoffed. Sweetheart, I've dealt with troublemakers since before you were born. This is my neighborhood. These are my rules. Morgan's small, knowing smile made Victoria visibly uncomfortable. I'm sure you've dealt with plenty of troublemakers. Very interesting. Victoria's final threat echoed across the street. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling the police. Let's see how fake your military story really is. Morgan calmly took out her phone and snapped a picture of Victoria Midrant. When I asked why, Morgan simply said, "Evidence, sweetheart. Always collect evidence." Victoria, true to her word, called the police at exactly 6 a.m. the next day. We could hear her pacing on her porch, loudly reporting a suspicious military vehicle, possible stolen valor, potentially dangerous individuals. She called the tax office, the fire department, and even started going door to door like a political campaigner, but instead of votes, she was gathering fear. Military people sometimes have PTSD, she whispered to a young couple. It's risky having them near families. You never know when they'll snap. Her paranoia spread like wildfire, but Victoria's true weapon was her ability to sound reasonable. She would plant subtle seeds of doubt. I'm not saying anything definitive, but doesn't it seem odd they moved in so quietly? That truck, what? Could they be hiding? She poisoned the well long before we had the chance to explain ourselves. Her online campaign exploded neighborhood apps filled with wild headlines. Fake military family threatens community. Stolen valor, investigation in progress. Victoria had turned the neighborhood watch into psychological warfare. Then came the sirens. 2 squad cars pulled up to our house. Police Chief Martinez, a seasoned man who looked like nothing surprised, him and Morris stepped out. Officer Thompson followed, younger and stiffly formal. Neighbors poured into the street, eager for the show. Victoria took center stage. Officers, thank God you're here. She gestured at our house like she'd uncovered a major crime. She claims to be military, but she has no proof. The husband is too afraid to speak. They've been terrorizing this community. Chief Martinez responded professionally, though he clearly had experience with Victoria. We'll verify identities and check for violations, he said calmly. I was shaking as we stepped outside. Officers, we've done nothing wrong. That truck was a scheduled pickup. My wife is active military. But Victoria pounced. He can't prove it. Show them documents. Chief Martinez requested ID and I panicked. But Morgan moved slowly, confidently. She reached for her wallet, like she had all the time in the world. Silence fell over the entire street. Morgan's military ID glinted in the morning sun. Colonel Morgan Swift, United States Army. Victoria's face watching her process what she was seeing was something I'll never forget. First, confusion, then disbelief, then utter horror. Chief Martinez and Officer Thompson immediately snapped to attention, offering crisp salutes. Colonel Swift, our deepest apologies. The same neighbors who had doubted us now stared at Victoria, who stood frozen, her mouth hanging open. Officer Thompson leaned in to Martinez. Should we file a report for false emergency calls? Chief, the entire street rippled with realization. Victoria Palmer had just lost the war she started. Holy crap, did you see that? Someone behind me whispered. Victoria just called the cops on a colonel, another voice gasped. Has she completely lost her mind? The murmurs swelled as the reality settled in. Victoria Palmer, the self-proclaimed judge and jury of our neighborhood, had just made an unforgettable spectacle of herself. She scrambled to recover, stammering about fake IDs and how military personnel could easily deceive people. But her earlier authority was completely gone. Chief Martinez shut her down with firm professionalism. Ma'am, this is verified federal identification. I strongly recommend you rethink your complaints. Officer Thompson couldn't even hide his embarrassment. Here, he was a young officer, still trying to build his career, realizing he'd just walked into a harassment case wrapped up as a formal complaint. Both officers' body language shifted from guarded control to clear, respectful deference. Chief Martinez, clearly a seasoned veteran of neighborhood nonsense, seemed almost relieved to be handling something so straightforward. His years on the job had taught him how to tell the difference between a legitimate concern and a personal grudge. This was clearly the latter. Meanwhile, Morgan handled the whole scene with the calm of someone who had dealt with far worse. Officers, no harm done. Thank you both for your professionalism and your service. As the police prepared to leave, Chief Martinez quietly spoke to Officer Thompson, but his words carried clearly in the morning air. Make a note of this address and keep an eye on Palmer. People like her, they don't stop. Victoria heard every word. I watched her face drain from flushed embarrassment to pale shock. She'd gone from being the authority figure to being the one under scrutiny. The tables hadn't just turned, they'd flipped completely. As the squad cars rolled away, Victoria stumbled back toward her house like a broken machine. Her confidence, once unshakable, was now completely shattered. But what exactly did Martinez mean? Keep an eye on Palmer. Would Victoria back down now or double down? What do you think? Drop your guess in the comments. For the next 3 days after the police incident, Victoria Palmer's house was eerily silent. No loud phone calls on her porch. No early morning HOA patrols. No clipboard walks around the block. The quiet should have been a relief, but instead, it felt more dangerous than all her previous noise. From our bedroom window, I could see her shadow pacing behind her tightly closed curtains. She'd sit at her computer for hours, the glow from her monitor casting sharp, eerie shapes on her walls. She was planning something. When someone like Victoria goes quiet, it's not because they've surrendered, it's because they're regrouping. How dare they humiliate me? I could practically hear her rage from 3 houses away. 20 years in this neighborhood. No one embarrasses Victoria Palmer and gets away with it. What I didn't know then was that Victoria had shifted to intelligence gathering. She'd spent those 3 days diving deep into military complaint procedures, officer reporting channels, and possible misconduct filings. Her search history would have been a terrifying thing to read. She wasn't giving up. She was just finding another way to fight. Fine. She must have eventually thought, if she wants to wave the military card, I'll show her what real power looks like. I still have connections. I still have influence. Let's see how they handle that. Victoria's entire identity was built on control, and she wasn't going to let one defeat crumble her empire. When she finally retaliated, it was brutal. It wasn't random, either. She'd carefully studied our routines, memorized our schedules, and tracked our patterns. She knew exactly when we left for work, when Morgan returned from her runs, and when we had visitors. The timing of her violations was surgical. Morning complaints would hit just as I rushed out the door for critical meetings. Evening notices would appear exactly when Morgan came home exhausted from her workouts. Victoria had weaponized the HOA with a level of precision you'd expect from a military campaign, except she was waging war against innocent people. Day 4 was when her counterattack launched, and it was astonishing. I came home to find 4 official violation notices slapped onto our front door like a formal declaration of battle. Excessive noise. Complaint, 6:15 a.m. vehicle positioning violation, 2.3 inches beyond the property line. Unauthorized signage. Welcome home banner installed without approval. Landscaping non-compliance. Hedges allegedly 1 inch too tall. And she was just warming up. Day 5. 6 more violations, each more absurd than the last. Trash bin placement. Too early for pickup. Porch light, too bright. Paint color violation. Door shade, not pre-approved. Package delivery interference. Amazon truck briefly blocking the street. Pet noise complaint. Barking dog. We didn't even have a dog. Suspicious gathering. More than 3 people on the property. Us and a pizza delivery guy. Closing parenthesis. 10 violations in 2 days. $85 fines each. $850 in completely fabricated penalties. But this wasn't just about money. Victoria had escalated into full-blown psychological warfare. She began tailing Morgan on her morning runs, recording her with her phone. She parked her car to block our driveway on purpose, making me ask her to move every single time I needed to leave. She suddenly walked her little yappy dog exclusively on our lawn, letting it relieve itself without cleaning up. Every night at exactly 11 p.m., her stereo would blast music, stopping precisely at 10:59, just before the noise ordinance kicked in. Victoria's attacks evolved into stalking-level harassment. She would stand for hours in her yard, coldly watching our house like she was on a security detail. She took flash photos through our windows at night, claiming she was documenting suspicious activity. She left passive-aggressive notes on our windshield. Some people think the rules don't apply to them. Community standards exist for a reason. Real neighbors respect property values. She even created a concerned neighbors group chat. We were conveniently excluded from where she stirred rumors and built sentiment against us. Her rumor machine was deadly. She kept watering the seeds she'd already planted about PTSD and dangerous military behavior. Now adding evidence she carefully manufactured. Victoria didn't just want us fined, she wanted us gone. The unpredictability of her harassment made it worse. Some days we'd get 3 violations, then nothing for 2 days. Then a surprise notice on a Sunday afternoon. The stress was suffocating. I wasn't sleeping. I jumped at every sound. I checked the locks repeatedly, like we were under siege. We were already $850 in fines, and it was clear she wouldn't stop until we either surrendered or went broke. One night, I broke. I sat staring at the stack of violation notices. Morgan, maybe we should just pay the fines. Maybe if we follow every rule, she'll leave us alone. Even as I said it, I hated how it sounded like giving up. Morgan looked at me with something between disappointment and love. You can choose to live in fear, Ryan. But I spent 8 years overseas defending our freedoms. I won't surrender them to a suburban bully. That night, as Victoria's perfectly timed music blasted again, I realized she was breaking me. I was afraid to step outside. Afraid to exist. Maybe she's right, I whispered. Maybe we don't belong here. Maybe we should just move. Morgan sat up like a soldier in a war zone. Ryan, I've faced insurgents with weapons, not HOA paperwork. I've led troops under enemy fire. I'm not backing down from a self-important woman with a clipboard. The next morning, Morgan calmly opened her laptop and made a new desktop folder, Operation Neighborhood Peace. It was the first time I smiled in days. She began documenting everything. Victoria's car, illegally parked by fire hydrants. Her dog, running off leash. Her own noise ordinance violations. Rule number 1, in warfare, Morgan said, snapping a photo. Know your enemy better than they know you. And Victoria Palmer's about to learn what real strategy looks like. But what exactly was Morgan planning? What do you think she found? Drop your theories below. Victoria Palmer arrived at the emergency HOA meeting 30 minutes early, walking in like she'd already won. She sat up confidently in the front row with a briefcase full of her so-called evidence. Linda, Tom, Patricia. She smiled warmly, greeting board members by name like old friends. Thank you for prioritizing this emergency. I know we're all busy, but this situation is threatening our entire community. She spoke with the calm professionalism of a concerned citizen forced into action. You could tell she'd rehearsed this moment carefully. What we're facing, she began, as more neighbors trickled in, is systematic intimidation by individuals who believe military service gives them special privileges. She popped open her briefcase like it was a stage prop, carefully arranged. Folders, photos, and official-looking documents ready for her performance. Her so-called evidence was designed to impress. Photos of our military truck positioned to look threatening, time-stamped complaints about Morgan's morning workouts, and witness statements about neighbors who allegedly felt intimidated by us. Each document was carefully crafted to sound measured and civic-minded, not petty. The tension inside the community center was electric. Neighbors I'd barely met, people Victoria had kept isolated from us, were all there, watching, listening. Some looked uneasy. Others seemed unsure which side to believe. Victoria's entire presentation was a masterclass in manipulation wrapped in the disguise of community protection. I've dedicated 12 years to this neighborhood, she declared passionately. I've preserved property values, protected families, and enforced our standards. Now I'm being harassed for doing my job. Her voice cracked at just the right moment, perfectly rehearsed to sound like genuine fear instead of vindictive rage. 25 neighbors sat in that room, more than the HOA had seen in years, and Victoria had them captivated. Her emotional crescendo was building toward the grand finale. But Morgan wasn't there to listen. She was there to end the war. She gestured toward her neatly arranged evidence packets, each violation carefully cataloged with time and photos. These individuals have shown utter contempt for our community standards, she pressed on, her voice growing firmer. They've used intimidation tactics, broken multiple HOA regulations, and have created an environment of fear among law-abiding residents. She paused deliberately, letting her words hang in the air while her sharp gaze swept the room for effect. I'm asking for immediate enforcement of all pending violations and serious consideration of lease termination for ongoing non-compliance with community rules. Her words settled over the room like a death sentence. She wasn't pushing for simple fines or a formal warning. She wanted us out, cast from the neighborhood like some kind of suburban exile. Morgan and I quietly slipped into the back row. Just as Victoria was finishing her opening attack, several board members were already nodding in agreement, clearly impressed by her polished presentation and seemingly airtight documentation. Somehow, she had positioned herself as the victim and painted us as the problem. This, despite the fact that she had once called the police on a decorated military officer simply for moving into her own home. When the board asked if we wanted to respond, Morgan rose with the calm authority of someone who had briefed senators and generals before. May I present some facts to challenge these claims? She asked politely. The room fell completely silent as she stepped to the front, carrying nothing but a slim manila folder. The contrast was striking: Victoria's flashy briefcase and dramatic poster boards versus Morgan's understated confidence. Mrs. Palmer has made serious accusations regarding our character and our compliance with HOA guidelines, Morgan began, her voice steady and clear. I believe in facts, not feelings, in evidence, not assumptions. So, let me offer some verifiable facts to this assembly. What followed was like watching a laser-guided strike dismantle a house of cards. Morgan opened her folder and, with military precision, began taking Victoria's case apart piece by piece. Evidence Package 1, she announced, connecting her laptop to the room's projector. Video proof of actual violations. The first clip appeared Victoria, unmistakable, dumping her household trash into our garbage bin at exactly 5:47 a.m. The timestamp was crystal clear. The video quality was flawless. Gasps filled the room as neighbors watched their so-called community protector break the very rules she enforced. Morgan continued without hesitation. Evidence Package 2, she said, switching to the next slide. Witness manipulation and falsified documentation. She revealed that Victoria's supposedly multiple witness statements actually came from just two people, both close friends, both neighbors on Victoria Street, neither of whom had seen any of the alleged incidents. Morgan displayed photos of Victoria's own violations, her car blocking the sidewalk, her garden exceeding the same height limit she cited against us, and her unapproved yard decorations, which broke the very signage policies she weaponized against our welcome banner. This noise complaint, Morgan pointed out, holding up another document, was filed at 6:15 a.m. regarding exercise sounds, but base security records show I was already at work by then. Mrs. Palmer filed a false report. Evidence Package 3. Morgan pressed on, her momentum unstoppable. Systematic harassment and stalking. Phone logs showed Victoria had called Morgan's workplace 6 times in just 2 weeks. There were 47 photographs taken of our home, many captured through nearby neighbors' security cameras, showing Victoria following Morgan on her morning runs. The mood in the room changed. Like a shifting fault line, whispers rippled through the back row and spread quickly forward. I didn't know she was taking photos of their house. 47 photos. That's stalking? No wonder the Johnson family moved away. Board members started firing pointed questions Victoria clearly hadn't anticipated. It was like the fog had lifted, and neighbors were finally seeing the situation for what it was. In quiet murmurs behind me, I heard, "She took photos of my house too." Remember, when she filed that complaint about my fence, I thought it was legitimate. The community was realizing they'd been living under surveillance. Their so-called guardian had been quietly recording their every move. Faces that once looked sympathetic to Victoria now showed nothing but anger and betrayal. Her reign was crumbling before everyone's eyes. "Mrs. Palmer," one board member asked, "can you explain why your complaints are processed in less than 24 hours while others wait weeks?" Morgan delivered the final blow. Evidence package for financial manipulation and selective enforcement. She presented a detailed comparison chart. 18 violations issued to us in just 14 days, while the entire rest of the neighborhood received only 3 during the same period. Processing records showed Victoria's complaints received priority attention that no other resident enjoyed. Phone records confirmed Victoria contacted municipal agencies 47 times in just 2 weeks, repeatedly trying to weaponize city services against private citizens. "Mrs. Palmer," Morgan said, locking eyes with Victoria for the first time, "you've accused us of expecting special treatment because of military service. But your documented behavior suggests that you believe you're entitled to special treatment because of your HOA connections." The unraveling was painful to watch. Victoria shot up from her seat, her carefully controlled image cracking like cheap plaster. "This is character assassination," she shrieked. "They're using military intimidation. None of this can be trusted. They've threatened witnesses. They've manipulated the evidence. They've destroyed our peaceful community." In desperation, she actually tried to lunge at the projector like smashing it would erase the truth. I stepped in her path. She swung wildly, but 2 board members quickly restrained her. "Ma'am," I said softly, "I think it's clear to everyone now who's really causing the disturbance." The board's 10-minute deliberation felt like an eternity, but when they returned, their decision was swift and crushing. All violations against Morgan and me dismissed as baseless. Victoria fined $500 for abusing the complaint system. She received a formal harassment warning, which would stay on her permanent HOA record, and the board enacted a new policy requiring corroborating evidence from unrelated sources for all future complaints, rule everyone would later call the Victoria Palmer Clause. Victoria stormed out before the meeting concluded, screaming about appeals, lawsuits, and constitutional rights she clearly didn't understand. That as she reached the parking lot, overheard her phone call. "Yes, I need to report HOA corruption and board manipulation." "What, my address?" "It's 1247 Pinewood Drive." Her voice no longer carried the same authority and now wavered with uncertainty. Who was she calling, and why did she suddenly sound so unsure? Do you think Victoria's new plan will collapse on her? Drop your thoughts in the comments. 2 weeks later, life on Pinewood Drive finally felt normal again. Victoria vanished from the public eye. No more porch pacing. No more clipboard patrols. No more public confrontations. Her house sat sealed tight, curtains drawn, shutting out the very community she once ruled. I finally started sleeping through the night. Morgan enjoyed her morning runs free from the constant flash of surveillance cameras. Maybe she finally backed off, I said one evening while flipping burgers on the grill. Maybe she realized she crossed the line and gave up. But Morgan shook her head. People like Victoria Palmer don't just disappear. They adapt. They find new angles. The most dangerous enemy is the one who's learned from failure. Sure enough, Saturday morning proved Morgan right. A large moving truck rumbled down Pinewood Drive and parked directly in front of 1245. Victoria's next-door neighbor, from our kitchen window. Morgan and I watched a young woman step out of the truck's passenger side, probably early 30s. Athletic, full of energy. She waved at everyone, she's instantly radiating the friendly vibe Victoria had never managed. When she knocked on our door later that afternoon, she introduced herself, Sophie Martinez. Just moved in next door. Well, next to that house, she nodded toward Victoria's. Sophie's relaxed conversation was a breath of fresh air after weeks of HOA warfare. Heard there's been some excitement recently, she said casually, as if the entire neighborhood hadn't been living under siege. Something about a bunch of complaints. Morgan and I exchanged knowing glances, unsure how much to say. Just a few community misunderstandings, I offered. Sophie laughed. I can't stand those types. You know, Karen personalities, people who think they can control everyone else's life because they've got nothing going on in their own. Her easy humor made both of us laugh for the first time in what felt like forever. Through Victoria's front window, I noticed the curtains twitching. The surveillance had resumed, except now her focus had shifted. Victoria's next campaign started a week later. She greeted Sophie with fake friendliness, offering to review the HOA guidelines for new residents. When that didn't work, she rolled out her usual strategy. Flower bed extends 6 inches beyond the property line. Vehicle parked 17 consecutive hours suggests abandonment. Music audible from adjacent property during quiet hours. Apparently, Sophie's humming while gardening was now a noise violation. Victoria was recycling her old tricks, fully expecting them to work again. But Sophie's response, completely different. She didn't get frustrated or scared. She seemed genuinely entertained. She documented everything with a calm, almost clinical curiosity, smiling through each new escalation. When Victoria's dog relieved itself on Sophie's lawn, Sophie took pictures, cleaned up, and waved cheerfully at Victoria's window. When Victoria reported Sophie's suspicious late-night activity, Sophie calmly provided her hospital night shift schedule and her supervisor's direct contact information. It was like watching a master chess player take on someone still learning the rules. What really struck me was Sophie's complete lack of fear. Neighbors before had either moved away or silently endured Victoria's harassment. Sophie, she treated every violation notice like a puzzle to solve, not an attack to fear. When Victoria snapped photos from her yard, Sophie would pose playfully or wave, effortlessly flipping the power dynamic. It was psychological warfare in reverse. Victoria had become the hunted. The full reveal came one quiet Sunday afternoon. Sophie's phone rang as she watered her garden. She answered on speaker. Unaware, her voice carried clearly across the street. "Hi, Dad," she chirped. I paused to listen. "How's the new place treating you?" The man asked, a voice I recognized but couldn't immediately place. "Great, very educational," Sophie said with a knowing smile. "Any problems with the neighbor we talked about?" "Oh yes, Victoria Palmer, at 1247 Pinewood Drive. As you described, she's been very active with her complaints. Be sure to document everything carefully." And then it clicked. I knew that voice. "I want a full report on her behavior," he continued. "Already on it, Dad. Photos, timestamps, violation patterns, classic harassment profile. Your training really helped." Pride filled his voice. "Good work. Your mother and I are proud of you for taking this assignment seriously." Then came the words that made Victoria drop her teacup. "Thanks, Chief Martinez." Through Victoria's window, I saw her face drain of all color. Her legs buckled as she steadied herself against the frame. Victoria wasn't dealing with just any neighbor. Sophie was the daughter of the very police chief Victoria had tried to manipulate. And now, the chief's daughter lived next door, monitoring Victoria's every move. Sophie smiled brightly toward Victoria's window. "Beautiful day for community monitoring, Mrs. Palmer," she called out. "Tell Mom I'll be home for dinner Tuesday." Victoria had spent years using law enforcement to control her neighbors. Now, law enforcement lived right next door, watching her. The final chapter. The following weekend, our street came alive with the first real block party in years. Everyone came except Victoria. Kids laughed, neighbors reconnected, and for the first time in ages, we were a community again. Sophie was right in the middle of IT, organizing games, introducing neighbors who'd been too afraid to talk before. I hung a new garden sign, Pinewood Drive, peaceful community. Established 2024. From behind her closed curtains, Victoria watched the celebration of everything she'd tried to destroy. And just as I turned to head inside, I noticed another moving truck pulling up to the house on Victoria's other side. Who could be moving in now? Was this justice? Or did it go too far? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable neighbor stories.